I from 1945 to 1965, there wasn't but one bluegrass band. On the top of Flat and Scruggs' first record was country music. On the side of their bus, country music from the Grand Ole Opry. The 1958 Life magazine article that led to Earl giving away a Vega banjo on The Price is Right and everything called them folk music in overdrive. Jimmy Martin didn't come out of the gate as the king of bluegrass. He came out as Mr. Good in country and all those folks. So nobody really called themselves bluegrass. And some of it may have had to do with the way in the late 50s, string band music was just, practically gone from the radio airplay. So that may have had something to do with them not using that term, but nobody except Bill Monroe used it. Now, I did a series of videos for Radford University, and all you got to do is type in my name and Radford University. It'll take you right to them. And they're like 5 1-hour videos there, and it's called The Origin and Development of Bluegrass Music as a Pure Creative Art Form. And I think that, to me, bluegrass music is the rhythm of Bill Monroe. And the rest of it is acoustic string band music. It might as well be country music. You can call it country music, hillbilly music. When they started the genreification of music, it was all based on the rhythm of that music. It don't mean a thing if it ain't got that swing. Mm-hmm. Where would the bossa nova, or where would the girl from Ipanema be without the bossa nova? How many steps down the street do you take after you've heard a Bob Marley song come on that you realize you're listening to reggae music? It's all based on the rhythm. Well, people don't seem to understand that the term bluegrass was applied to Bill Monroe's music at the Grand Ole Opry to separate him from the remainder of the Opry cast. It was not an endorsing term. It was a term of separation. He doesn't play like we do. He plays that music from up in Kentucky, that bluegrass music. And the term got applied to music at that point. And it was the music of Bill Monroe, basically, that happened. So, and when you get to studying him as a musical artist out there, artists are reflections of the times they live in. Some guy came to me a while back and said, why can't we just play it like we used to play it back in the 40s and 50s? And I said, it's because we ain't living in the 40s and 50s anymore. I said, we ain't got no more little cabin homes on the hill. We've got little trailer parks down by the road. We're living in a different day and time from when that occurred. So anyhow, I get to explaining about Monroe and that series of videos I did for Radford University, talking about his music as an art form. And the difference in him and all the rest of these guys was he would write a piece of music. It had its own unique lead line to the melody. It had its own unique set of words, and it had its own unique rhythm to it. That was the difference in him and all the rest. Most other people had one rhythm that the band played to. But with Monroe, every tune had its own rhythm. If you were doing something like Molly and Ten Brooks, when bluegrass people talk about timing, in most cases, they're simply talking about tempo. So everybody plays to the same tempo. If it's 120 beats a minute, that means 2 beats a second, period. And the closer your guys in the band know what that feels like, the tighter the band's going to be. But with Monroe, if you were playing something like Molly and Ten Brooks or Rawhide or Bluegrass Breakdown, he would push the front edge of the backbeat with his chop and give it just a little bit of a drive to it. If you were playing something like Road to Columbus or the Gold Rush, it would be right dead on the backbeat of the music. It would just float along. If it's dark as the night and blue as the day, there would be something there that it would sort of pull at it a little bit in the backbeat rhythm on it. So each tune had that. I mean, you take a tune like A Good Woman's Love, the first part, I was a rover, I'm landing on C. That's a real hard 3/4 time. Boom, chant, chant, a boom, chant, chant, a boom, chant, chant. When it gets to the chorus, instead of Rome and I go home, and it's got a lighter feel to it altogether, that's because the rhythm changed. between the verse and the chorus. The rhythm changed on it. And that's the difference in him and pretty much all the rest is his uniqueness. You know, I say in the end, in that video series I did for Radford University, 200 years from now, when the dust settles on 20th century American music, there ain't going to be but two names pop out of the hat. And that'll be Louis Armstrong and Bill Monroe. And the reason I say that is because almost everything in the second half of the 20th century came from one of those two careers. You can find the basis in one of those two careers right there. You know, when you go into that rhythm deal, that's a whole thing. That's the heartbeat life of the music out there. And I said, and most groups that played, you know, they play some instrumental at 176 beats a minute and just fly with it, and slow down and do a song at 130 beats a minute. The rhythm under them won't change any. It's just the tempos change and everything. You know, and I consider, you know, I'm throwing so much stuff out here. Good luck to you on the editing. But, you know, I consider Kenny Baker and Earl Scruggs the two greatest bluegrass sidemen in the Bluegrass Boys that ever lived. And it's simply because there was a band, the Nitty Gritty Dirt Band, came out with this Circle album years ago, and they had Roy Acuff on it. Roy Acuff, if you listen to that record, says, "All right, boys, we're going to do this thing, and we're going to get it in one take." Leon Russell has got a video out on YouTube out there talking about doing a recording session for George Harrison. And he was the actual recording engineer on this. And George Harrison had done a song, and he had a guitar break in it. And when it was over with, he wanted to overdub the guitar break. So they start overdubbing it. And he overdubs, and he overdubs, and he overdubs, and he overdubs. And finally, he's got 67 takes of it. And Leon, and this is on YouTube. And Leon says, "Come in here and listen to what I got here." He come in, and Leon played him one back. And the break on it was really nice. And George said, "That one was good. Which one was that?" And Leon said, "It was your first one." Now, that's what I found out about Leon in the studio, going to doing the Hank Wilson's back stuff and working for him after that. If you were in the studio with him, once everybody had learned where they were supposed to play in the parts, once you started running that tune down, you had about 3 chances to get it. If you didn't get it in those 3 takes, he took it out and threw it out and went to the next tune. He wanted that initial response. And that's why I called Kenny Baker and Earl Scruggs the two greatest bluegrass boys that ever were, simply because of the way they played. You know, Kenny Baker played exactly the same break in Mule Skinner Blues and Blue Moon of Kentucky, Footprints in the Snow, exactly the same break every time he played it, back up exactly the same. Go listen to Earl, not only on the Grand Ole Opry with Bill, but all the way up through Flatt and Scruggs' career. When he played something, he played it unless they were on their TV show and abbreviating an instrumental or something. He played everything exactly the same way, whether it was Flint Hill Special, Earl's Breakdown, Will You Be Loving Another Man, Rolling My Sweet Baby's Arms. The thing that was magic about Kenny Baker and Earl Scruggs was every time they played it, it sounded like the first time they played it. They were two of the most absolutely wonderful. You know, that was the thing about Monroe. You had that every time. When Kenny Baker was there doing him or playing for him and everything, it was wonderful. And it was the same way when Earl Scruggs was Bill Monroe. When he came to work for Earl, he stabilized the tempos in that music. And when he did that, that formulated that final product of that band. You know, there were so many wonderful things had come together during that. You know, you get to looking at Lester Flatt out there. Lester Flatt's a guitar in that player in that band, but before that he had played mandolin for Charlie and sung tenor to him. So when he came in the band, he knew how to phrase with the Monroe dialect in singing the songs. He also had, his grandmother was a clawhammer banjo player and had taught him how to play that, and that's where the thumb and the fingerpick guitar strumming came from. with it. All those things came together there and formulated, and they just happened. You know, Bill didn't have a sound that he went out and said, I want this, 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 and this. He had these people come together. When Howdy Forrester got drafted in the military, Bill announced it on the Opry. Chubby Wise down in Florida jumps on a train or whatever he got. He comes to Nashville, Tennessee. These people came seeking those jobs. It wasn't that Monroe went out looking for them. They came seeking jobs. You know, Monroe stood Earl up 2 times for auditions before Jim Shoemate finally brought him to the Grand Ole Opry and had him play. And when he played for him, supposedly Bill looked around at Lester and said, what do you think? And Lester said, he can keep up with us. And Earl was hired, you know, in that. But that it was just a magic thing that came together there when all these guys, you know, it's like all the guys that came in with him, the Benny Martins, the Jimmy Martins, the Charlie Kleins, all these wonderful musicians through the years, the Ed Mayfields. And that's all in the primal form of the bluegrass. I have bluegrass in my video series being divided into 2 parts, a primal form and then an elevated art form that it became after, you know, Bill Keith came in and introduced Sailor's hornpipe into the band and just changed banjo playing within a year. Those 510s, they recorded Santa Claus, Sailor's hornpipe, was a Shenandoah breakdown. There were 2 of them, Salt Creek and Devil's Dream were the ones they recorded. That completely changed banjo playing around all the fiddlers conventions. Everybody was playing. Most of them went after the most of them played that, but anyhow, that changed it right there. And then Richard Green, not long after that, he was a Scotty Stoneman had been some of his inspiration out there, but Stephen Grappelli wound up calling him the greatest jazz violinist the North American continent ever produced. That was the kind of musicians that were coming to Monroe at that point, and all of a sudden the tunes started getting more complex and more, you know, it don't matter whether it was Crossing the Cumberlands that Bill wrote that Lamar Greer did such a wonderful job with, or later on the Jerusalem Ridges and stuff like that. The music became much more sophisticated. The scope of the music, I think, actually narrowed itself when Bill Keith came along, because prior to that, the banjo had its own part to play. If you listen to Rawhide out there, Rudy Lyle's break didn't have a thing to do with anything the mandolin played or the fiddle played. Wheelhouse. You know, you can play wheelhouse melodically on a banjo, but that Hubert Davis roll is the one that gives you the roll of that, like the driving wheel of a locomotive. And actually, there's a third part to the wheelhouse the way Hubert Davis played it. You know, so the banjo had its own part to play. All of a sudden, after Bill Keith comes in the band, the banjo's playing what the fiddle's playing, what the mandolin's playing. And to me, in essence, for a while there, it almost narrowed the scope of the music. But then it went on later on, just, you know, I think the guy's a monument, a musical monument. So.
Butch, I got to thank you for the detailed and highly informative explanation of the growth and development of Bill Monroe's band. That's just incredibly informative. And I got to tell you also that I listened to all 5 hours of the university interview and found it exceptional. I recommend it to anyone.
Well, thank you.
And I